Good morning, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mental Garage. A lot of you have been waiting, a lot of you have been asking what's happened with the VL, what's going on. I have had the engine back for a few weeks now. Obviously, I've had other stuff on the go. I've had the drift car that I wanted to get done, so the block and head and all that, the assembling of the RB30 was put on hold for a little bit until I got some other stuff out the way, but I finally got a bit of free time today where I'm going to head over to Boost Works and, I want to go over there so he can overlook what I'm doing on the engine because I'm going to assemble it myself and obviously go over all the parts, make sure everything's clean before we start putting it all back together. And I'll show you guys step by step on, how I'm going to put this engine back together. It's going to be just probably short snippets. I don't want to waste too much of their time when they're working as well. So if you haven't seen the episode where my head gasket blew on the VL, I'll just run you through quickly what happened. So we're up on the dyno, tuning the engine up, and the head gasket actually did blow, and I don't think it had anything to do with either the tune or, like a detonation or anything like that, or a power failure. I think it was pretty much just the fact that the head did lift. So this time around when I do go to put it on the dyno, I'm going to take off the rocket cover and just check all the head studs, make sure it's all torqued down to spec. So pretty much I got a new head gasket. It's a HKS multi-layered head gasket. I've got bearings, I've got my pistons, and I've got new rings as well. Head's been checked over. The head was cracked through the cam tunnel, so that's been re-welded. Got my main cradle. So yeah, got everything to start assembling. In here's all my nuts, bolts, and stuff to put back onto the engine. So we're going to head over to Boost Works now and start assembling. So what I'm going to be doing here is this is my top ring that I'm starting with. I'm going to do all the top rings first and then move to the bottom rings. Obviously there's a difference between the top ring measurement and the bottom ring measurement. So this is just a ring filing tool. We're going to put it in here. We're going to clamp the ring together nicely so it touches each side of the blade, and then we're just going to spin the blade. Do that a few times, go over to the block, sit this in the block, push the ring down with a piston, make sure it's nice and square, and then with a feeler gauge we're going to measure the gap. So holding the piston ring in the grinding tool, a few turns at a time, making sure that when we touch the piston ring together that it's nice and even. Then we go over to the block, we're seeing inside the block, we're going to grab a piston here and just push that piston ring into the block a little bit, making sure it's nice and even. I'm grabbing the feeler gauge, checking the gap, still needs a little bit more, so we'll head over back to the grinding tool. Once again, just grinding a little bit at a time, making sure we don't take too much off. Back over to the block, set the piston ring back in the block, grabbing the piston, pushing down on the piston ring till it sits nicely in the block, feeler gauge and check the gap. Alright, so they're all the top rings. I've got them still in order of which piston they went into. I'm going to keep them in the exact order that I measured them in the piston holes. These bottom rings, you can see that these bottom rings are a different colour. They're like a nice shiny stainless, and these here are like a darker finish. These ones here are softer metal, so apparently these ones here won't take as much grinding to get them to gap up. So I'm going to do the bottom ones now and then put them back in the pack with the labels. I'm going to mark on the packs which piston number they are. That way they go on the piston in the exact order that I measured for the bore sizes. So we've just given the bores a quick cone up. What I'm going to do now is got it some brake clean. I'm just going to spray everything down. I'm going to blow inside all the ports, all the galleries, all the threads, wherever there's threads, clean that all out and then give it a good blow down and mask up the block and put some paint on it. Alright, so as you guys know, this engine here was an engine that I've built before, and obviously fixing it all now because it blew the head gasket. Just something that I've checked is I've pulled my oil pump apart, I checked all the gears, I pulled out the spring and that little collet. I pulled that all out, cleaned it, checked everything was good in there. I've taken all the grub screws out, so these ones here, I took all those grub screws out of each hole and brake cleaned and blew it all out to make sure there's no metal filings or anything gunked up inside. So that's pretty much ready to put into the block and start putting all the bearings all together. So we're going to start installing the bearings now. You can see one side of the bearing's got a raised lip on it. That side goes into the block first. We're going to sit it in. With our finger, we're going to feel it to make sure that it sits in nice and flush. And then with the other side, we're just going to push down nice and evenly until it sits in place correctly. And we can feel that both sides are sitting flush within the block. This side of the bearing here, we've actually sanded some of the material down. What you're going to see us do is when we set the crank in, we're going to move the crank back and forwards to make sure that we've got enough end float. With all the bearings installed, we've oiled them up. I'm going to set the crank in. And move the crank it back forwards, we can see that we've got good end float. I'm going to start oiling up all my crank journals and all my bearings. And then putting the main cap cradle in. We're going to start installing all my studs now, making sure that we've got oil on all the bolts, on all the threads. Some oil or some assembly lube will do. We're going to nip down all the bolts to get the main cap cradle sitting in place correctly. And then with the main cap cradle on, we're going to just check the end float once again. And then start torquing down all our bolts when we're happy with our end float. So as you would have seen, I've oiled up all the bores on the block. I've got all my pistons here. I've got all my new rings on. I've got new bearings on the pistons. Everything's been oiled up, so pretty much the pistons can go straight in now and start bolting them in. Here I'm going to just install my last piston. I've got the ring clamp around the piston. Obviously you've got to compress those rings to get the piston to slide into the block. With a rubber mallet, just tapping down the piston until it sits in place. I'll spin the block over here. We still have to get the connecting rod to sit around the crank. Making sure that we're oiling up as we go. And then installing our last con rod cap. What we've got to do here is obviously we want to start torquing down all our con rods. all the caps, all the bolts. We're going to spin the engine over. That will allow us to get to each bolt that we need to torque down. And that's all the rotating assembly done. It's been a couple of days since the last clip you've just seen. We had the wrong head gasket. It was a 1.2 head gasket that I got, and we wanted to put a 1.5 mil head gasket on it because obviously we've faced the head and the block, so we've got the new head gasket. I'm going to head back over to Sean's at Booster Works and slap the head on. I have in the meantime assembled a lot of the accessories for the engine, so you'll see that the engine's got accessories and stuff on it now. I didn't throw that in the video only because it is, you know, nuts, bolts and putting things on the engine, which is pretty boring, I think. So I'm going to slap the head on and that'll be the engine complete. I'm at the stage now where I can start torquing down all my head studs. Do it in 3 stages, so I'll torque the head down 3 times in different torque settings. So there it is, the RB30 is all back together. I have got all the timing gear still loose, all the rocket gear still loose, because I found over at Sean's when he had a car up on the dyno, there was a fancy rocket cover gap which I liked, and I went onto this website and I found they do like adjustable cam timing gears and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to put some new hardware onto the engine, so I'm going to leave it like that for now, and the next episode I'll put all the hot side, cold side, and hopefully be putting it in the car. So it's not a educational video, this is just a entertainment video. I'm not an engine builder, so I didn't put like specs of what was going on and go into too much detail on the engine, but hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, stay tuned for the next one, because the next one will be putting the engine in the car, hopefully getting it up and running. Thanks guys, see you on the next one.